Hi. So this will be my last video. It's weird how far we've come in these last couple of months. My burden, my passion for telling the story of Joseph again was so great that I just couldn't think of anything else. I've learned so much through doing this, and the videos have ministered to me over and over and over again because I listen to them in my car during my prep time and other things, and I remind myself of what God is saying, because what God says to everyone, he says to me. And so I'm kind of gonna miss it. And my husband was like, oh, well, the next time you do videos, we could do this and this. And I'm like, I'm not doing videos again. This was just for this Bible study. So it's kind of weird to be done, but it's time. So now what we have is Jacob gets the blessing of a lifetime, and he finds out that Joseph is still alive. It's more than he could have ever thought. And sometimes when we pray, we limit God and what we ask for because we're like, he can't do that. He can do whatever he wants. So why are we holding him back? And so Jacob gets the blessing of the lifetime and finds out that his son is still there. And then he is to come and spend his last days in Egypt. And that's a big move. That's a really big move. And God meets him along the way. And he's like, Jacob. Jacob goes, here I am, God. He talks directly to him and says, don't be afraid. This is with me. I got this. I want you to remember back to where you were when God told you to do that, and you did it. God appreciates that, and he recognizes how much faith that takes. There's reasons why you are where you are, and we just need to hold on to those in the dark times. All of this was orchestrated so many years ago to save so many people. It hurt so bad. And it brought about so much good, but so much had to die first. And when Joseph takes Jacob to Pharaoh and presents him to Pharaoh, Jacob, so funny. He's so much like me in some ways, because Jacob tells Pharaoh, my years have been just filled with pain and sorrow and sadness, and I haven't lived as many years as my forefathers have. And so instead of thinking about all the amazing miracles that God has done in his life, he just focuses, it's been pretty sucky. And I was listening to a podcast of Victor Jackson yesterday, and he talks about how he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob was a mess, and he had all sorts of dysfunction and all sorts of issues. And he will become Israel. But God says, I am the God of your process, of your changes, of who you are while you're changing. I'm not waiting for you to be perfect in order to come about. And for the rest of eternity, he's going to be known as the God of Jacob. And Jacob thinks his life is just filled with turmoil and stress and pain. And God doesn't see it that way at all. I limit myself so much on my influence and my ability. And I just see the things that I've done wrong. When God's like, I got such big plans for you. And all I see are the mistakes and the sorrows and the hurts and the pains. And he's like, but do you see all these other good things? And so another thing that came up was that Jacob, he blessed Joseph above all the others. And then he called them all out. And he just said, here's your character, here's your character, here's your character, all 12 of them. And he says, here's what's going to happen in the future. And I was like, that's kind of rude. But what he was doing is he was prophesying to their generations to come. that these were going to be things that they were going to struggle with. And here are their strengths and here are their weaknesses. And you don't have to fight against those, but recognizing where you're strong and where you're weak can only make you stronger. And so Dad knew a lot more. And as he grew and as he became, as he learned more and he found out more about God, he allowed God to show him things. And so, yeah, he had a lot of hardships and trials, but he didn't have to look at his life that way. Would he ever recognize that God spoke directly to him and that he would be the man who created a nation? And would he recognize how powerful that he would be, that there would be holidays and things named after him and his sons and all this stuff? Or is he just going to always recognize, I had a lot of pain in my life. So have I. But what are the good things that have come out of it? And so Jacob, this is another interesting thing. Jacob looks at Joseph's kids. Joseph's kids have grown up in extreme wealth and power and a lot of popularity and fame. They've literally asked for nothing their whole life because their dad is second in command of all of Egypt, and Egypt is the most powerful country in the whole world. And Jacob's worried about him. He's like, have you forgotten? Or do you even know? Do you recognize that you come from my line? Yeah, okay, you've got Pharaoh on the other side, and you've got all that influence and all that popularity and prestige. But I come from a line of God. And so he wants his boys to remember who they are and where they come from. And I thought that was really interesting because he wasn't like, look at how rich they are, look at how wonderful they are. He's like, go back to the basics, go back to the foundation, because none of that matters. I thought that was really interesting. And then he, once again, there's a switch in whose line is going to be more important later on. God never looks at like who we think is going to be important. He chooses who he wants, and it's all about the heart and the willingness and all that stuff. And so as we're going through all of this, Joseph had so many years of darkness, so many years of breaking of his spirit and his will, so that he could be placed in a position where he could do great things. And I was thinking about it this morning. After his dad died, his brothers were still afraid that they were going to get punished for what they did 20 years ago. They can't move past the sins of their youth. They can't move past it. And I start thinking about how Joseph reminds me a lot of God. He's like, would you stop it? It's fine. It's all over. It's fine. Stop apologizing. But they can't move past it. They don't see the good that has happened. All they see is their part in the bad. And they're held back in captivity of what they've done in the past. And Joseph just weeps before them. He keeps telling them over and over again, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. But they are unable to accept it. And I wonder if that's how they live the rest of their life, because they made a choice in a moment of frustration and anger when they were just a bunch of kids, and it changed their life. And they were never able to forgive themselves. Joseph's life was forever impacted, but he didn't hold it against them. They held it against themselves, but it wasn't something that was held against them, and where they weren't ever able to be forgiven. But sometimes I think the biggest thing that we have is that we're not able to forgive ourselves. And so after Jacob dies, they're worried that they're going to get punished for what they deserved to be punished for. And Joseph's like, that was so long ago. Please, let's just enjoy each other. It's okay. And sometimes when I come to God, I'd say quite a few of the times, all I think is like what Jacob did. All these bad, all these horrible things, and not the blessings. And sometimes when I come to God, I think about all the bad things I've done. And God is like, what are you doing? We've already gotten over this. I've already told you. Yeah, but do you really understand what I did? Do you really understand? This was really bad, and I knew better. Yeah, and he lets it go, but I don't let it go. So this whole story, this whole journey of Joseph, what is it to tell you? The hard things in life that come, they're going to be different for every person, but it's what you do with them. It's how you come out of them that really makes a difference. Can you let it make you into a better person? So every time I've gone through a really bad trial, I have two choices. Do I want this to make me bitter, or do I want this to make me better? Because either way, I've got two choices. This one's a hard one for me, and it's a lot harder to fight against and to see. Bitter or better. That bitter pill, it's really hard. And it's really hard to see the good when you don't see what's coming up and you don't see where the blessings are. You're hoping that they're there, but you don't know. And I started thinking about Joseph. Joseph had those dreams when he was a young kid, and those were the prophecies that people were going to bow down to him and all that stuff. But in the end, that wasn't his best blessing. That was just a small part of how great his life was going to be. Think about it. He probably waited all those years for those prophecies to come true. And they were just a snippet in his life. And his life was so much bigger. And he didn't even care about them like bowing down to him in the end. That wasn't anything. He's like, I don't care about that. Did you see all these other cool things? Did you see this? Did you see this? And he realized that family was far more important. And so those prophecies, those visions, those promises that God gives us, they're so big, but they're so little at the same time. They're just a snippet of what's to come, and we just need to hold on. If we can allow this to make us better and not bitter, we need to be more like Joseph and not like his brothers who can't move past what they've done in the past. Once you've apologized and you've asked for forgiveness, you're done. You don't have, yes, accept the consequences, but you don't have to stay there. Allow God to move you into the next position. Recognize what you did wrong, why you did it, and try to not let it happen again. But that doesn't mean you have to constantly be feeling condemnation and guilt and shame. And Jacob, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he never recognized who he was. He took it all for granted. God spoke to him and told him everything was going to be okay. And all he could see was his life was filled with suffer and turmoil and pain, and that it wasn't as long as his dad's life. God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob, the man who's a mess, who had all these issues, is the one who would become a great nation. He saw something so much better in Jacob than Jacob saw in himself. In his sons and his family was so much greater than he was. Isn't that just something? So it's really about our perspective. And that's what this whole study's been about. Why God? Why? It's finding God in the midst of our struggles and our pain. Where is he? Because he's there. We just have to put on the right lenses, put on the right glasses. If I take off my glasses, I won't be able to see clearly. I need to put on my glasses, my God glasses, my faith binoculars, in order to see what's really going on. All right, it's been fun.